Sergio here, Max Business Profits, and today I am here again with my friend and um, home inspector extraordinaire, Rick Kooyman from Trade Secrets Inspections. Today is kind of an interesting little podcast or video cast we're going to have here. We're going to talk about the weather. Now, we're not
Yes,
just going to
indeed.
talk about any weather. We're going to talk about Florida weather and why you need to know how it impacts your home, the structure of your home, and what you can expect living in Florida. Rick, on top of being an extraordinary home inspector, mold assessor, air quality uh, assessor, Rick is also a former pilot. So, weather is near and dear to his heart as it is mine. And I'm not a pilot, never flew an airplane, but jumped out of a few of them. So, without taking up any more space or time, let Rick take over. Rick, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Great to be with you again, Sergio. And this should be fun. Yeah, I thought it'd be different to take a little break from the real estate world and let's talk about the weather here a little bit.
Well,
We
yeah,
all live
we
here
we
and
need we need a break from the real estate world, right? I mean,
yeah, right. It's a little brutal, but so is the weather.
yeah, so is the weather. So here we go.
Yeah,
Welcome to
right.
Florida.
Welcome to Florida. Exactly. So, like everybody says, it's paradise. Well, you know what? Paradise can be harsh.
Define paradise, I always say.
Right? Right. So let's talk about what weather is, fundamentally, how it happens. And, we're going to discuss thunderstorms and how that becomes into, the bigger things, which is our name's threat is the hurricane.
Or hurricanes, right?
So if we can just have a basic understanding of how weather works and the fundamentals of it, then when you go outside, you can kind of just look up at the sky and kind of read it for yourself and get an idea of what the atmosphere is doing just from fundamental understanding of what you're seeing. So I
Right.
thought I'd share a little knowledge on that. Like you said, I do have a long background in aviation and I spent many years teaching people to fly and teaching weather in classrooms. So this is not a foreign topic to me by any means. So let's talk about that. The biggest player in the weather is the same biggest player in owning our homes, and that's the sun and ultimately water, and those are the two big players in what we own and how we live and what the day does. So how does it work? It starts with that sun, that big star. It's up there. It's fusing, right now it's fusing hydrogen into helium. And in doing that, it's creating an abundance of excess energy.
Yep.
It is radiating that energy outwards in forms of shortwave radiation and microwaves and such. And those radiation waves go out and they get absorbed by the things out in the universe, such as the Earth and us. And in turn, those objects absorb that energy and radiate it back as heat.
Right.
So that's where we get the heat that we live with, and we end up collecting it down here in paradise, as they call it. Uh, but where does that go with it? So ultimately, because the earth is not an even surface, and we have variations in materials and colors and textures and all that, we end up with uneven surface heating, right? So we have hot spots and cold spots, and the parking lot's hotter than the pond, and all this, that, and the other thing. So we end up with a temperature differential. And in our world, we have hot and cold and high and low pressure, and hot moves towards cold and high moves towards low. And in so doing, we end up with things moving or motion, and that is wind.
Hmm.
Plain and simple. That's where wind comes from. It's uneven surface temperature, which is ultimately more accurately defined as a pressure differential, right?
Well, that probably accounts for the turbulence you feel on an airplane.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are air current flows, which we'll get into how those occur, and that's going to play into how a thunderstorm develops and how it ends its life ultimately. But yeah, what we're playing with is basically we have surface heat going on, and and once that occurs, it is going into an environment of that is constantly changing. So our atmosphere is constantly moving and changing. It's never statically sitting there, but
Right.
we like to use some reference numbers as just a point of talking about to ease the confusion and all the variables that play into the weather and make it so difficult to predict, right? So when things get hot, they expand, right? Pretty fundamental idea.
Law of
And
physics.
right. So let's take a fixed parcel of air, just like a cube of air or a balloon of air. And let's just say we put it out in the parking lot and we let it get hotter in the sun. We can assume that that air pressure is going to go up, right? Because as it getting hotter, the pressure inside the balloon is increasing and the balloon is going to expand relative to the pressure outside the balloon, right? So hot and high pressure go together and cold and low pressure go together is the fundamental understanding here, right? So if we have our parcel of air, our balloon, right, and it's at the ground at sea level, and it's at what we call standard atmosphere, which we'll just say is, we'll just call it 59 degrees, which is where they like to start it at, right? And we take that balloon and we lift it up to 1,000 feet.
Right.
As we go up into the atmosphere, there's less above us of the atmosphere, which is less weight, which is also lower pressure, right? So just going up, it lowers pressure, right? Because you're getting higher in the atmosphere. There's less above you pushing down on you. That's lower pressure. Okay. So if we take the balloon and we raise it 1,000 feet, it's in an environment that the pressure is decreased and it is expanded. When it expanded, it cooled, and it cooled at a rate that we have measured as a reference point again. And we call it the adiabatic lapse rate. It's just a rate of cooling, right? Big words, great things, whatever. But we just need to understand that as we take our balloon and we lift it up, it cools as the pressure goes down. But the standard is, say, 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit per 1,000 feet, right? If it's cooling at a different rate than the environment around it, it's going to go up or down relative to what it's doing, right? So if the balloon is hotter inside than the air outside of it, it's going to continue to go up, right? Because it's still warmer, right? Hot air
That's
goes.
the whole concept behind flying in a hot air balloon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fundamentally how it works. Hot air rises.
That's all I can think of
I
right now.
mean, we're keeping it as basic as we can. So, right, hot air is going to go up, right? So if we have our balloon in an environment that when we raise it 1,000 feet, its rate of cooling is at, let me say this correctly now. If it's cooling slower than the environment around it, it's going to stay warmer, right? And then it's going to continue to rise. And we can also call that unstable, right? So it's going to continue to move in the direction of which it was going. Stability would be to suppress motion and to stop things.
Correct, right.
Right. So that would be the opposite side of that. If we took the balloon up and the outside air was at a higher temperature than our balloon, then our balloon is colder than the air around it and it descends.
Contracting, right.
Right. So that would be stability
Okay.
or relatively higher pressure. Right.
Right.
So in the environment has a lot to do with what happens during the day when we have that uneven temperature heating going on, right? Because we have the diurnal cycle of night and day, and we have the differential of materials and colors and all that. We get the temperature differential, but the air environment keeps changing as like big oceans of air, basically. And sometimes we'll have a stable air mass over us, and sometimes we'll have an unstable air mass over us. So we go back to what the balloon wants to do, and the unstable air mass, which is more typical of this tropical environment. And it has to do a lot with, we get an excessive and an abundance of heating going on. So now our balloons get really hot and they start to go up in the middle of the afternoon, right? Well, as they're going up and cooling at a rate slower than what the atmosphere is doing. And they're still hot. So they
So is
continue
this
to
what's
go.
causing condensation,
Well,
basically?
this is how we get the clouds to form, right? So
Right.
the temperature differential creates the uplift. Now we can have uplift created by mountains or whatever, but down here
Mhm.
we don't even have a hill, but
Right.
we have temperature differential,
Right.
and that's our lifting force, right? So our lifting force is really temperature differential, and then it's the environment stability. And we often have more temperature differential than we have stability. So regardless of how good the sky looks, we're generally in an unstable atmosphere in the afternoon, and
Sure.
we get afternoon thunderstorms. This is how this
So
happens.
that
So
whole cycle you just described, it just kind
right. So
of
as
repeats
the
every
balloon
day.
is going up and it's cooling down, eventually that parcel of air meets its dew point, right? And condensation occurs, which is the same thing that's happening in our homes at our AC vents and causing the mold to grow on the ceiling. The
Mhm.
local temperature at that vent is at or below the dew point of our local environment, and the
Correct.
water is coming out of gas state and becoming a liquid,
Liquid.
right? So as that's transitioning states in the sky, it's actually attaching itself to dust particles. You know, the water needs something to adhere to
Mhm.
go from the gas state to the liquid state, and it becomes a little tiny particle of water on a piece of dust. And those build up and they're held up in the sky in a localized cold area, and that's what we call a cloud,
Mm.
right? So we see what is the same as, the morning fog on the ground. That's
Mhm.
visual condensation. That is a cloud on the ground. That's the same thing. Fog is a cloud,
Right.
right? So it's just moisture changing states. And then if we keep it in that unstable environment, which we generally have because of the excessive heat, then that uplift continues to occur. And the little white puffy cloud now becomes the towering white puffy cloud,
Yeah.
which we call the towering cumulus cloud. And that towering cumulus cloud develops into
Mm.
the mature thunderstorm, right? And that just is water particles moving at a high rate of speed in a vertical air mass going up and down in the sky because of this temperature thing going on. And they create static. The static, is more energy, and we get a net positive and a net negative building up in the clouds, and we have thunder and lightning, right? So this is all just this moisture moving around happening, the same thing. And it all came from that temperature differential and just how the pressure changes affect and what the differentials are relative to each other, whether it goes up or down, and the stability of things, right? So as the thunderstorm develops and it gets big, it reaches its saturation state eventually, and then it starts to rain, right?
Right.
And it's what we call the mature state of the thunderstorm. So basically now we have updrafts and downdrafts occurring in that cloud. The downdrafts are the rain literally falling out of the cloud, right? So they've reached a mass that needed them to fall out. Gravity won the race, and now
Right.
they're falling. Okay. There can be a lot of dynamic stuff going on in that storm, and oftentimes that rain drop will get cycled through the cloud up and down. As it goes through a downdraft, it'll get caught in an updraft, and then it will become what we call super cooled water, which is water below the freezing point,
Hmm.
right? So it's not even ice, it's still liquid, because literally its surface tension is stronger than the expansion force of the freezing of the water. So the water becomes super cooled, and as soon as something breaks that surface tension, touches that water, it freezes on it. It becomes ice. And that's how airplanes get ice on them. They fly through the super cooled cloud, and it literally just becomes ice on the surface. Well, that same thing can occur in the thunderstorm without the airplane, and that's a hailstone,
Right.
right? So that's those things
Wow.
just go around, and you can't even believe it, but that ice ball is literally going up and down in
Up and
that
down.
cloud, 30, 40,000 feet. And then it gets shot out of the top of the cloud most of the time when it's hail, because it's finally ejected out and leaves that cycle. And you see the hailstorms, and you'll see the hailstorms and they'll be in sunny skies a lot of times. They're outside of the
Right.
thunderstorm. They're on the leading side of it, in fact, because the
Right.
updraft is so strong, it's like a
Right.
cannon. It's shooting them out of it, literally.
And they've picked up so much mass from falling and going back
Yep.
up and freezing and expanding and
Right.
wow. Well, I mean, all right. Well, that was 20 minutes of
Holy cow, right? What just
a
happened?
semester worth of you know weather sciences in high school. But
Yeah.
so being in this condition, what 8 or 9 months out of the year at this point, it seems like. I'm assuming that takes a major toll
Yeah,
on
absolutely. I mean, and
structures we live in.
that's why the word harsh, I think, goes with paradise very well down here, because our two biggest enemies to our properties are water and sun, whether
Yeah,
it be water in a liquid form or the gaseous form, which is the local humidity, which is generally the biggest monster we fight down here, is the humidity coming into the environments and
sure.
causing the mold problems. I was just at a customer's house this past week, and she was having mold throughout the house, and there was poor ventilation, bathrooms without, exhaust vents, but they
Hmm.
have windows, and she says, well, I open the window after I take a shower to let it dry out. Well, that's actually working against you,
Right.
because
It's
there's
more
more heat
humid
and
outside than
humidity
it is inside.
outside than inside. And
Right.
there's this fancy word called psychometrics that says which way heat and humidity move. And
Right.
and yeah, you're actually not helping yourself with that window situation. So yeah,
So,
water, big problem. The sun, big problem. It wears on
well,
things. UV's a real thing.
and I can tell you that's probably one or two of the things I hate most about living down here because number one, anything out in the sun, whether it's your lawnmower, your fencing, nothing
Nothing.
lasts. If
No.
I mean,
Just
the
it
sun just breaks
it
everything down. I'm
right.
actually surprised how well roofs last, how long they
Yeah.
last.
And that's,
And they never last as long as they're warranted for or
that's
guaranteed,
the biggest thing down here. That's
right?
what confuses people so much, is they're so used to
30-year warranty. Yeah, good luck.
lasting so much longer, and they can't conceive of it'll only last you maybe a year, and then the sun is going to destroy it, and it ain't going to
Yeah.
be worth having anymore.
Yeah, and it's the same with moisture. I mean, there's not a
Yeah, it's
damn thing I
crazy.
can keep outside
No, and it
that
gets
doesn't somehow
sticky.
find water into it. I don't get it. I was like just going through this weekend. I was like, I have these buckets and these containers outside with painting supplies, in the on the patio, out of underneath the overhang, and I'm like, I open it up and there's an inch of water in them. I'm like,
Yeah,
what the hell?
yeah,
How? I
condensation
mean,
is
it's
a monster
but I mean
everywhere.
the rain here too. It's just the rain will come down, it'll go sideways. I swear to
It'll
God, I think
it'll
I've
just
seen it go
stay
back
there and
up.
be like a liquid sky for a few
Yeah, it's just
days.
it's like why don't you just take whatever you're putting outside and just submerge it in the
Absolutely,
tub for about 30 seconds
absolutely.
and that's about 2 weeks outside. But okay,
Right.
so moving forward, I mean, so what do people need to know and how do you work with something like this?
Well, you got to understand that, it's a constant maintenance effort. There is no golden bullet. There is no super solution. I mean, this is the whole cycle. That thunderstorm that we have every day is the same motive and monster that is the hurricane that we're all waiting, to not happen, but is
You're
ultimate.
breaking my heart, Rick. I was waiting for the
But it's just that
the
this is
easy
a
button to
never
this.
ending fight, and you have to acknowledge that if you want to be in this environment, you have to accept it for what it is. And part of that is living down here requires different maintenance practices, and understanding that buying a 30-year-old house is probably in a different condition than you may think it may be if you're coming from, the Midwest or the
Right.
the Southwest, for that matter, where time stops and things
Yeah.
last forever.
And it's funny you bring this up because there's still quite a few um, wood frame houses out there.
Yeah.
And I used to really like wood frame houses because I felt like, well, the house can breathe a little bit, right? It can contract and expand but as time goes on, I realize that I don't care if my house breathes or not.
No, we're not in the environment where the breathing house method, that is a real
You
thing
know,
in construction methodology, but
yeah.
that's not a good thing down here. No,
No,
no, it's
it's
not.
not. And I come from up north where it's viewed very differently. But
Mhm.
I mean, and I used to think, well, that's a good thing. I mean, people always used to say, well, with frame houses, you have more incidence of termites. Well, and that's not necessarily true. You'll get subterranean termites in the rafters in the trusses
Yeah,
of a
and
block
it's
house.
they're gonna
None of that
swarm
matters.
every season anyway, so
Right.
that's
So
regardless.
what I've come to realize is there's nothing to do with termites. It's
No,
all about the moisture. It's
it's
all about
about
the
moisture.
frame of that house
Yep,
absorbing water over time, and it's wood. I
absolutely.
don't care how much you pressure treat it, short of ceramic coating it.
Right. And then you got to understand that those things are porous materials. And
Absolutely.
even when
Even
they get
concrete,
painted,
even concrete and
well,
block.
yeah, and they get mold on them, and people think that they can be treated or painted or cleaned, and ultimately, once it's affected, it's never unaffected. If it's not, you can scrape it off of hard, then it's not gone. Unfortunately, it's gonna
Right.
be there. It's gonna come back. It's gonna create that odor. That odor is a mycotoxin. It's a VOC gas. It's not gonna come up in an air sample, like a spore, but it can still be in the airspace. It's a whole different thing to test
Sure.
for, to try to pull a gas sample out of airspace.
So just out of curiosity, the house that you looked at today, what was the approximate age of that house?
Oh, it was a late 90s home.
Which there are plenty of them here.
Yeah,
I live in one.
yeah, yeah. It was a classic late 90s construction home, flat ranch.
Yeah. So yeah, so a late 90s home might seem like an old house here, but you go to other places of the state and you go to other places of the country.
No, that's
30-year-old house ain't that old.
No, we're not even starting looking at old at that point, right? But down here, it's like that yard equipment stuff. I mean, these products, there's very few products that will go 30 years in this environment. And I
I
had this
look, I
conversation with the roof people all the time, the metal roofs, the concrete tile roofs, the glass tile roofs. They got 50, 60-year life expectancies from the manufacturer. Well, that's great, but they're not the only thing up on the roof. There's an underlayment and a roof
that's
deck,
right.
fasteners, and all these other things and adhesives, and none of those things last that long.
And I raise poultry as a hobby. I have turkeys and stuff, and a lot of their devices to feed and water them are made of plastics and ABS and all that stuff. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you what, none of that stuff, I never had any of that stuff last more than 9 months to a year.
Yeah,
If it's out in
right.
the sun,
A
getting hit
year.
by 3 to 4 hours of sunlight a
I
day,
know. I know. It's crazy. I tell people
you
that
walk
all
you
the
walk
time.
out there, you pick it up, the handle just comes right off. It's like
Yeah.
a snap. It
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's amazing. Even like, I used to back in the day, I've been through like probably 3 or 4 riding lawnmowers, you know, and just like the seats and
Every
if
part
there's
of
any
it.
plastic,
The
everything.
wire.
Even if you look at the cars, right? Well, why is the plastic on these cars starting to crack and fade? I have a Land Rover out there, 2002. Every piece of plastic on that car
Brittle.
exterior, every piece of trim, don't even touch it.
Yeah. Brittle.
It's like eggshells.
Yep. For
It's
sure.
insane.
It's a crazy environment, people. It's paradise. It's paradise, my friend.
Now there's a price, I guess, right?
Isn't there though?
So,
Well,
people need to be aware of this. They need to be aware of the impact this stuff has in their exterior of the home, but of course the interior of the home, because at some point, if the interior gets moisture, that mold is going to get into the air system.
yeah. And the thing is that we are constantly in the state of all mold needs is a place to land because it's got everything else in the air. It's so humid. The conditions are ideal for it. So yeah, it's always there. It's always just waiting.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, just based on air conditioning units and the way they're designed, I mean, they're drawing air from the outside.
Most often, our homes are not airtight. And then when we do
No,
radon systems, we pump outside air back into the house.
Right. But
Just
that's why
nothing.
you kind of
So
look
it's,
at,
it's total
right,
counterproductive.
right. But you look at your grill on your AC unit, and the air handler. Well, that mold came from someplace. It just
Yeah.
didn't decide to
No,
appear.
it came out of the air and it landed on there.
Right.
Now you're pumping it around the house, and yeah, fortunately, that coil is a metal surface, and if it's maintenance properly, regularly, you can get it cleaned, and it's not
Yeah, and you can use ultraviolet
brittle.
lights and repel it as much as
And
possible. But
you got to do all these things.
yeah,
That's
but
the
at the
thing,
end of
is
the
there's no
day,
silver bullet. There's no magic.
yeah,
We got it solved.
at the end of the day, though, I mean, if somebody suspects they even have mold in their home, or if you found it inside a vanity cabinet or something like
Mhm.
that, you pretty much probably should get an air quality test, is my guess.
Well, more than just the air quality test, because that's why I mentioned the word mycotoxins, because the air quality test is for particles. And
Mm,
a mycotoxin is a gas. It's the
mm,
gas product that you are feeling and experiencing,
right.
that you smell that musty odor.
Yeah.
And that is more readily identified through a visual inspection of someone that's practiced and knows what to look for and what the signs are, and what the indications of that might be in there. There are means of doing mycotoxin testing. It's a little elaborate, and it's, in my opinion, not necessary unless there's some legal reason that we have to prove this. But people need to understand that a moldy environment is an unhealthy environment, and that if you continue to stay in a moldy environment over a period of time, it will have a neurological effect on you.
And I
It will
imagine it will
change the way
on your
you
pets.
feel. It
Yeah.
will change the way you behave. It will change the way the medications you take affect you. I mean,
Wow.
it has huge indi down the line effects on things that people don't even realize, and they're just like, "Oh, who cares? It's just mold. There's mold everywhere. Why do we even care?" Well, to each his own, and if you can tolerate it, great. That's fine.
Well, I mean, do
But
you
in
care?
most cases, it is having a health effect on us,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
mean, and do you care about your children? Do you care about your pets?
Or do
You,
you care about your employees? That's
yeah,
another
your
thing. I
employees.
often go into offices that have moldy, air ducts and mold
Yeah,
on
you
the
can smell it.
on the corner, and you got to understand that as an employer, your employees' function is going to be affected by that environment and that health effect, right? So their performance is deteriorating because you have them in an unhealthy environment. So it's in
Well,
everybody's
yeah,
interest to deal with these things.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So I'm assuming you're qualified to detect all this and
Yeah.
help. So,
Absolutely. That's what we're here to do, and try to we're here to share the knowledge and spread the truth, and we don't do the work. We're not selling the remediations, we're not selling the kitchens, we're not selling the
right.
air handlers. We're just out there telling that it's true or it's not true. Not everybody's a liar, and not everybody's telling the truth.
Right. Right. There, and I guess there's different variations of the truth, I suppose. But
For sure, right? And like I said, to each his own, we all get to decide ultimately what our environment is we want to live in. But you got to understand that sometimes disregarding things is not necessarily in your favor.
no, not at all. Okay, great. So if somebody's trying to get a hold of you, what's your phone number? Give us your website address. Give us all that pertinent information.
Absolutely. You can get a hold of me directly at 239-537-1186. Anytime. You can call me or text me. You can email me at rick@tradesecretsinspections.com. And obviously that's the website, Trade Secrets Inspections, secrets and inspections with an S.com.
Well, and before you sign off here, and I'm going to want you to get that information out again, but I want you to state all the services that you are providing, because you're not just a mold guy. You're not just a
Yeah, we can help you with everything from your insurance inspections and your insurance documents to dealing with the problems in the spotting and the odors. I have test equipment for, a dozen different various gases, and we can do
including
particle
radon.
sampling, including radon. Absolutely. We run the gamut on trying to understand what's going on with homes, helping people own their homes, helping them work with their contractors, helping them understand what contractors they need to work with and when. All these things are owning homes and not just selling homes and buying homes. Of course, we do that stuff as well. And, it's like I said, if you want to go out and get fast food, you go to the franchise that sells the fast food and you know what you're getting. If you want good food, you don't go to the franchise.
You
You
don't
go
go through the
to the
drive-through.
five-star chef, right? You
Yeah.
find the people that know what they're doing and it makes a difference.
Right, right, very good. So yeah, that's Rick, Trade Secret Inspections. If you're looking to buy or sell real estate, I think, if you're looking to sell real estate at this point, trying to get some of these inspections done, because you're competing in a market with an incredible amount of inventory right now. You
Yeah,
need every
finally getting into a competition.
Yeah, you're going to need every edge possible over your competitor to close a deal as fast and as much money as possible. Rick does this.
Yeah,
So
we
Rick,
can
one
get
more
you set up
time,
before the listings, the pre-listings, get the
pre-listing
certificates,
inspections, absolutely.
environmentals, anything you need. So you're not caught off guard, you know what's going on. And it's not a problem to have to disclose things sometimes. It's not a bad
No,
word.
you want to.
Makes things happen faster,
That's right. That's
right?
right. So Rick, one more time, phone number and website address.
239-537-1186 and tradesecretsinspections.com.
Excellent. Okay, until next time. And Rick is a pretty regular person that we have on this podcast and this video cast because Rick is full of incredible information. And if you are involved in real estate whatsoever in Collier County, Rick is a guy you're going to want to connect with. So thank you again, Rick, for being here. And until next time, all the best to you.
Yep, it was a pleasure.